Shang and Zhou, China. About 1800 BC, the Shang kingdom is founded. About 1400 BC, the Shang began writing oracle bones. About 1050 BC, the Zhou dynasty begins. About 500 BC, the first coins are used in China. 475 BC, the Warring States period begins. 371 BC, Mencius is born. 256 BC, the Zhou dynasty ends. The wisdom of Zhang, mother of Mencius. Mingzi was a famous Chinese scholar who advised kings during the turbulent end of the Zhou dynasty. European historians translated his name to Mencius. The story below is based on a traditional tale told about Mencius's childhood. Mencius was advised by his mother, Zhang, long before he became a counselor to kings. Mencius's father died when he was a very young boy. This meant that Zhang had to figure out how to provide for her young son. One night she went to bed hoping that in the morning she would know what to do. As the sun rose the next morning, she knew what to do. She would weave. That way she could sell what she made and buy food with the money. Right away she set to work on her loom. As she worked the silk thread through the loom, it occurred to her that she was not weaving a piece of colorful fabric. She was weaving a better life for her son. Day after day she wove, and the whole time she sat at the loom she thought of Mencius. How happy his father would be, she said to herself, if one day his son grew up to be a scholar. Mencius and his friend copy the workers in the graveyard near Mencius's home. Mencius and his friend squabble like the merchants in the market. But one afternoon she glanced up from her loom to see Mencius playing in a disturbing game with his friends. They were digging what seemed to be graves, and they were pretending to be corpses and mourners. Zhang was shocked to see her son playing such a game. Then she realized that the boys were mimicking what they saw in a graveyard near where they lived. She said to herself, I should not raise my son in such a place as this. I want my son to be a scholar, not a gravedigger. That evening she told Mencius they were moving to a place where he would have better influences on his life. So they moved to a new home next to a bustling marketplace. Zhang did not particularly like the men who worked in the market, for they often argued and fought with each other over money. But Mencius was happy there, and he made lots of new friends. Zhang picks up a knife and slashes the cloth that she was weaving. Zhang packs her belongings to move again. Mencius works hard at his studies. For a while all was well, and when Zhang worked at her loom, she again thought to herself how happy her husband would be if his son grew up to be a scholar. But one afternoon she looked up from her weaving and saw Mencius and his new friends swearing at each other, punching each other, just like the men who worked in the marketplace. Zhang frowned and immediately began packing. This time they moved next to a school. Mencius watched the children learning to read and write, and he asked his mother if he could join them. She smiled. At last, she said to herself, I have found a place that is right for my son. Now he could grow up to be a scholar. Mencius did well in school, and Zhang continued to do well with her weaving. Her pieces were bigger and more beautiful than ever before, but one afternoon Zhang noticed that Mencius had come home from school earlier than usual. She looked at him carefully and asked what he had learned in school that day. Mencius blushed. Not much, same as yesterday. Zhang knew Mencius had skipped school, so she picked up a knife and slashed the cloth that she had been weaving. All of her beautiful work fell to the floor in tatters. "No!" cried Mencius. "What are you doing?" Zhang said that she had cut her weaving to show him the mistake he was making. "Skipping school is the same as me cutting my weaving. If you do not study and cultivate your character, you will end up a thief or a slave. If you do not weave, I will also end up a thief or a slave. They are the same thing. Do you not see that?" From that point on, Mencius studied hard in school, and he went on to become one of the most famous scholars in Chinese history. Mencius once said that he who attends to his greater self becomes a great man, and he who attends to a smaller self becomes a small man. Wise words indeed, and a lesson learned from his mother. Based on this story, how did location influence Mencius? As you read the chapter, think about what Mencius' life tells you about ancient China.